Hey, McNutt here. I'm about to tell you one of the most improbable, seemingly impossible stories you've ever heard. But it's so much more than that. Yes, this story has been told many times across the intertubes. But the entirety of the story, the fact that it is, at its heart, a story of destiny, unthinkable tragedy, and also great achievement, is known by too few. For those of you vaguely familiar with the story, it starts with a miserable excuse of an airplane essentially disintegrating in the sky and a 17-year-old girl falling 2 miles through a massive thunderstorm into the Amazon jungle. And that's a lot, but if you really want to understand this miraculous survival, you have to go back almost 2 decades to understand how this young lady was able to survive and ultimately make the dream of her parents into a glorious reality that, in a way, serves us all. Imagine you're flying around and suddenly day turns to night. Turbulence tosses your plane like a child bouncing a toy off the nearest wall. And in an instant, everyone on board vanishes and you are alone, strapped in your seat, falling from unthinkable heights to the earth below. Hold on to that image. We have to head to Germany over 20 years earlier. Okay, I wrote an entire sub-story for this section, but it's too long. It's amazing, but you clicked on one story and I don't want to distract you with another, but I have to give you the bullet point, cliff notes, cheat sheet, highlights of this remarkable journey of our subject's father. It's critical for the big picture and it's 100% worthy of a feature film all on its own, not joking in the slightest. So, in 1947, a young man, Hans Wilhelm Kopke, finished his doctorate degree in biology and wanted nothing more than to study the remarkable biology and ecological diversity of the Amazon rainforest in Peru. He wrote to the University of Lima to inquire about a position. A full year later, he gets a reply, obviously email could have solved a lot of problems here, that indeed they did have a position for him. The plan, he would go to Peru while his new fiancée Maria completes her doctorate and joins him later. But there was one problem, he had no money. Germany is here and Peru is here. Telekinetic transportation had not yet been invented. The short story of Hans' solo trip to Peru for his dream job is that he, on foot, crossed the Alps in winter, tried to climb over a high fence, fell, was hospitalized, healed, went under the fence on the second try, got arrested for being in Italy illegally, spent several months in prison until a rainstorm caused the prison walls to collapse. He escaped, hiked to France, crossed the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain, stowed away in the belly of a ship that was transporting salt while buried in salt for days, was discovered as a stowaway and arrested again. The ship arrives in South America. Woohoo! He made it. He was tossed immediately in jail. Released 2 weeks later, and he begins walking across this. He catches a train in Brazil and makes it to Lima, Peru. 2 years after he was sent the letter that the university had a position for him, which they no longer did. He did get a job at the Natural History Museum. His fiancée Maria came to Peru by plane, lazy. She got a job at the Natural History Museum as well, and they both became highly respected and influential scientists and advocates of the rainforest with a dream of creating a nature reserve. Oh, and they had a little girl named Julianne. And right about now, she is boarding a plane for one of the most horrifying experiences you can imagine. Thank the gods she's her father's daughter. On Christmas Eve 1971, Julianne Kopke and her mom Maria were trying to get from Lima to Pucallpa to see her father Hans. He specifically told the two travelers not to fly Lanza Airlines. It was widely known to be unsafe, but the airport was packed because many flights had been canceled the day before. If they didn't fly Lanza, they wouldn't make it in time for the holidays. The chaos at the airport was highlighted by a very determined man trying feverishly to get his film crew booked for his current project, Aguirre, The Wrath of God. Most people know Werner Herzog as the legendary documentarian known for, among other things, his fierce determination. Herzog and his peeps were able to get another plane, but that won't be his last appearance in this story. Julianne and her mother Maria boarded Flight 508, a Lockheed Electra L-188A. Julianne sat in row 19, seat F. She took the window seat with her mom next to her and a portly man on the aisle. Julianne loved flying, but her mom did not. The flight was only about an hour long. Toward the end, the sky suddenly turned black as the pilots flew directly into a massive, powerful thunderstorm. As if the sudden darkness weren't concerning enough, brutal turbulence hit the plane hard. This plane was not designed to handle turbulence. Julianne remembers the overhead storage bins bursting open as Christmas gifts, flowers, and luggage joined the already airborne dishes and lunch that had already been served. It was chaos and everyone was terrified. Julianne saw a brilliant flash of light over the wing. She couldn't tell if it was an explosion or a lightning strike. At that moment, her terrified mother calmly said, "Now it's all over." The next thing Julianne remembers is being alone in row 19, seat F. Her mother was gone, the fat man was gone, and the plane was gone. She was falling from the sky, seatbelt snapped in place so tight it was painful. She was falling from 2 miles high in the dark, lightning-plagued sky, spiraling towards Earth. Julianne's free fall likely lasted a little over a minute. That's a really long time. Try holding your breath for a minute. Actually, hold your breath for a minute and then start the timer to get an idea of how long Julianne's minute was. She would have experienced below freezing temperatures, struggled to breathe, and likely hit a velocity of around 120 miles per hour, all while watching the Earth zoom toward her. Impact was inevitable. Death was certain. Except it wasn't. One of the last thoughts she had prior to blacking out was that the jungle looked like tight bunches of broccoli. And that's exactly what saved her. I should clarify, I'm not implying that eating your broccoli will save you in similar situations, although if steamed properly with some butter and salt, it can be really good and is packed with vitamins, minerals, potassium. But an open field or less dense, not as tall jungle canopy would not have slowed her down enough. The fact that she landed in an old-growth, densely packed, tall rainforest is likely the key factor of her survival. And that would be reason number 673 to restore as much forested land as possible. Am I right? When she woke, she was under the row of seats and her seatbelt was unfastened. She believes she must have awakened earlier to unclip her seatbelt but has no memory of it. She simply laid still under the row of seats for the rest of the night as the rain poured down. Sometime later the next day, she felt dizzy and unstable but started to move. She finds a cut on her calf, but after several attempts, is able to stand. Looking around, she sees no debris, no bodies, just her 3-person passenger seat. The jungle looks undisturbed. She now only has one shoe, a floppy sandal, and her glasses are gone. A problem for many reasons, but especially in a jungle where many venomous snakes look like vines or leaves. Her mini dress is not standard issue survival attire. Her only advantage is her calm nature and knowledge of the jungle that she has essentially been raised with. She notices an injury on the back of her right arm. It's small, about an inch deep, but it's not bleeding. Her collarbone is broken, but incredibly not painful. As a person who has experienced 5 broken collarbones, I simply don't understand this. Thirsty, she licks water from nearby leaves and starts to evaluate her predicament. In most survival situations, the standard advice is to stay put and allow rescue to come to you. Julianne decides to start moving. She's well aware of how visually disorienting a jungle can be, so to avoid walking in circles, she finds a tree in the distance with a distinct feature and moves toward it, finds another, and again, and again, and again. She couldn't understand why there were no more signs of debris or wreckage, but soon she does find a bit of debris in the form of a small bag of candy and a traditional Peruvian Christmas cake that was too disgusting to eat. I'm not knocking Peruvian Christmas cakes, but this one was soaked with rain and mud. Obviously, thoughts of her mother occupy her mind. She calls for her periodically, as well as other survivors, but nothing comes back. The first nearly comforting sound she hears is a search plane flying above the dense canopy, but there's just no way to be seen. How can she be rescued if she can't be seen? She knows she has to find a way out of the jungle. As Julianne continues to shake off the fog of shock and confusion from the surreal crash and finding herself suddenly in a rainforest, she becomes more aware of her surroundings and notices the sound of running water. Well, dripping water, too small to even call a stream, an ambitious drip of potential. Still, this is great news. She knows that rivers are maps, if not highways, of the rainforest. Flowing water, no matter how small, leads to more water. This drip will become a stream, and that stream a river. She remembers the words of her father, who often said, "If you get lost in the jungle and find flowing water, stay near it, follow its course. It will bring you to other people." As the tiny stream grew in size, it actually became more difficult to follow as the undergrowth became thicker and debris from heavy rains created obstacles. She has no way to light a fire, and yes, she knew how to do it, but everything was soaking wet. During the dry season, humidity is 90% in the rainforest. Julianne was now in the middle of the rainy season. The darkness of the first night began to fall. Nights were difficult as biting bugs, loneliness, and despair make proper rest impossible. Exhaustion and fatigue quickly become serious issues as her lack of food weakens her even more. Back in civilization, Julianne's father refuses to believe that his wife and daughter were on the plane. He simply can't imagine that they would get on the dangerous plane after agreeing to avoid it. The next day, Hans hears the passenger list over the radio, confirming that the two people most precious to him were indeed on Flight 508. The following day, Julianne continues down the stream, but the constant climbing over fallen trees takes a toll on her limited energy. Finally, the stream is big enough that she decides to walk in the water. She only has one sandal, so she always steps forward with that to avoid sharp objects. She continues to hear search planes overhead, but the canopy above still enshrouds the stream. The jungle is hiding her. On the third day of her attempt to escape the jungle, Julianne discovers the first piece of wreckage, a turbine. One side of it is completely black. She imagines it must be from the lightning strike that she saw. On day 4, Julianne hears a sound that chills her to the core. The flapping of large wings. Her mother is an ornithologist, so she knew exactly what was making this foreboding noise. A king vulture. A large bird that would only be gathering if carrion, decaying flesh, were nearby. Moments later, she discovers why the vultures were gathering. For the first time, the second time of this nightmare odyssey, she experiences true horror. As she moves around the bend in a river, she sees a passenger seat with 3 people still in it. The seat is upside down, and the crash victims, having fell from the same height as Julianne, have been driven 3 feet into the jungle floor, legs splaying upward. Let's step back for a moment, because sometimes descriptions can go by faster than our mind can process what is, in this case, a fever dream macabre image that is high-octane nightmare fuel. A young girl injured, alone, scared, in certain shock, in complete survival mode, stumbles across something so graphic that it must have been all but impossible to process. The king vultures perched waiting to feed. While understandably apprehensive, Julianne was also practical, based in reality and somehow in control. Remember, she's the child of scientists, not fantasy writers. Knowing other bodies could be near, possibly even survivors, she searched around but only found more metal debris. Around the 5th or 6th day, she hears the call of a huatzin, or false chicken, and that gives her hope. It was a distinct call that's a mixture of buzzing and groaning. She heard this call often from her family's jungle home in Panguana, and she knew that this particular bird nests exclusively near large bodies of water, close to rivers, exactly where people tend to live as well. Finally, approaching the river, she found her path blocked by driftwood. She spent hours trying to get around the obstacle, and soon she ran into another barrier of densely packed reeds, 15 feet tall. They have stalks covered with sharp edges that cut. She makes it to the river. It's about 30 feet wide, allowing her to, at last, see open sky. A plane flew somewhat near. She waved and waved, but the plane soon faded away. She couldn't help being angry that she was finally in a place that she could be seen and there was no one to see her. The anger quickly turned to despair as the openness of her current location also amplified her loneliness. She knows that she could be the only person within thousands of square miles. The words of her father came to her. Where there's a river, people cannot be far. She gathered her resolve and tried to form a new plan. The riverbank was simply too overgrown to hike along. The dense vegetation would make poisonous snakes and spiders way too difficult to avoid. She decides to wade through the shallow water near the bank, using a long stick to sweep the ground in front of her for dangerous stingrays. She moved forward with great caution, always leading with her one-sandaled foot. But the mud and constant hidden debris became too frustrating to navigate, so she moved to the deeper water of this Amazonian river. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? A river in the Amazon has what in it? Flesh-eating piranha. Yep, this is where they live. And there are also caiman aplenty. Now, if you're thinking caiman, those are the small alligators. Well, there are two species of caiman. One is 16 to 18 feet long and weigh up to 1,100 pounds. The other is the spectacled caiman. These are only about 6 to 8 feet long and usually max out around 200 pounds. So one is bigger than you and the other is the size of your average fever dream nightmare. But remember, Julianne is armed with knowledge. She knows that piranha only attack in shallow, still water. Did you know that? I did not know that. And caiman don't typically attack humans, so cool. With no fear and a bit of cautious confidence, she went into the deeper part of the river and found travel a bit easier. As long as she's right about the flesh-eating fish and the modern-day dinosaurs that lurk beneath the surface. As night fell, she tried to find a place on the bank that offered some protection from at least one position, a steep embankment or a large tree. Mosquitoes or other biting, buzzing jerks chased away any hopes of a restful, deep sleep. The only respite from the mozzies was the rain, a freezing, pelting rain that felt like pinpricks. She tried to use large leaves to cover, but the rain was inescapable. During these long, dark nights, she often wondered how her mother was doing. And what about her father? How was he? Her thoughts bounced around at night, a virtual battle of uncontrollable images and worst-case scenarios. But she did know one thing. She wanted to live. She pondered what she'd do with her life if she gets through this. She wanted to study biology like her parents. She wanted to do something that would benefit humanity. The cut on her calf had started to swell with white flesh, but didn't hurt. Inspecting the cut on the back of her upper right arm, she twisted her head around, a very difficult view. She discovered the wound was packed with maggots half an inch long. Incredibly, she was familiar with this. Her dog had had an injury that became infected with maggots, and her father used kerosene on the wound. This caused the maggots to come crawling out of the dog's wound and eventually healed. But she didn't have kerosene, just a twisted piece of metal that she used to try to pry the maggots out. As soon as the metal touched the little demons, they disappeared back into her flesh. Continuing down the river, she noticed that the animals didn't seem to be worried about her. Even howler monkeys, an animal known to be shy, didn't flee at the sight of her. She realized she was in an area where humans were not common and that she would have to travel even further to find help. December 31st, 1971, her father wrote to his sister. A week has passed already, and the plane has not yet been found. The weather is mostly good, so search should resume. It was clear that the plane had not been found, and some were speculating that it could have made an emergency landing somewhere else. Remember, this is the 70s, so communication wasn't like it is right now, where you know where everyone is every second of every day. Julianne's father was searching for a reason to hope. The next day, she awakens to severe pain on her upper back. A wipe of the hand reveals blood. She realizes that while making her way down the river, bobbing in the water, she was severely sunburned. Still, the river was the best way to travel. While getting out of the water to rest on the riverbank, she hears a strange sound that she immediately recognizes as that of baby alligators. She turns to see that she is dangerously close to a brood, and that the mother, which appears in the next moment, will certainly attack. The mother rises on her legs and races towards Julianne, who does what? Run into the forest? No. She slides into the water. Again, somehow, Julianne doesn't panic but relies on her knowledge of the jungle. By this time, she already had many caiman encounters. While floating down the river, she would often come across caiman that would run into the water at the side of her. Most of us would simply rise out of the water and run across the surface if this happened to us. But Julianne knew that caiman flee to the water no matter the direction of the perceived threat. She knew the caiman might swim under her or past her, but she was confident they wouldn't attack her. Hunger starts to overwhelm her to the point that her decision-making begins to be compromised. She sees poisonous arrow frogs often and decides that she must eat one. Fortunately for her, she's unable to catch one. On day 10 in the jungle, she struggles to climb over river logs and her strength fades further. She finds a graveled bank and decides that this would be a good place to sleep. Later, she awakens to see something strange and is convinced she's dreaming. She sees a boat. A large boat that she has often seen natives use. It can't be. She looks again. It's real. She then notices a trail going up the slope of the steep bank. She can even see steps in the trail. She was so weak it took hours to get up the embankment. At last, she gets to the top of the trail. She sees a simple hut and the boat's motor stored next to a container of gasoline, but no people. She remembers the maggots in her arm and uses a nearby piece of hose to pour the gasoline on her wound. The pain is excruciating. At first, the maggots try to escape by burrowing further down into her arm. Finally, she's able to remove about 30 maggots. It's a much-needed mental victory. She notices a path leading into the jungle, but she doesn't have the strength to explore it, so she tries to get some sleep. The floor of the hut is too hard, so she goes to the riverbank and, covering herself with a shirt she found in the hut, sleeps well for the first time in over a week. The rain pours down as she decides to stay in the hut for one more day to get rest. Despair and hope battle for prominence in her mind as she imagines many other passengers have likely been rescued. She's well aware that she's starving, dying, and that it's been too long since she's had any food. She tries again to catch a frog, but simply can't do it. Bonus fun fact here, while Julian was struggling to survive, just a few rivers over, this was happening. Werner Herzog was shooting Aguirre, the Wrath of God. You'll remember he caught a different plane. Crazy, right? Around twilight, she hears something she hasn't heard in 11 days. Human voices. 3 men come out of the forest. When they see her, they instantly stop, shocked, even recoiling, almost as if ready to run away. Why? Well, what this dirty, blonde, half-starved, nearly dead white girl didn't know is that her eyes were completely red from burst blood vessels, likely from the sudden decompression when the plane blew apart. Side note, I remember a good friend of mine who loved horror movies once told me that little white girls were the scariest thing on earth. I suppose these 3 loggers would have agreed with her. Luckily, Julianne quickly spoke Spanish and told them that she was in the plane crash. While tending to her wounds, one of the men confessed that they thought she was the river goddess Yakumama, a serpent-like creature believed to have the ability to heal or curse individuals depending on their respect for the natural environment. The 3 forest workers gave Julianne food, dressed her wounds, and removed even more maggots from her arm. For those interested, the current maggot count is about 50 maggots. The men confirm that the airplane has yet to be found and that she is the only known survivor, but she can't believe it. The next morning, Julianne is placed in the boat and covered with a tarp. She sleeps deeply on and off for the ride back to civilization. As they arrive at the village, children run from her, screaming. An adult woman yells, "Those eyes! I can't look at them! Oh God, those terrible eyes!" This picture was taken shortly after she was rescued, and you can see that there is no white in any part of her eye. They were completely blood red. While Julianne was being cared for, a woman named Jerry Cobb, an American pilot, offers to fly Julianne to Pucallpa, where she can get better treatment and be reunited with her father. Perhaps sensing Julianne's understandable reluctance to fly again, Jerry Cobb explains that she is a highly skilled pilot. In fact, she was recently certified to be an astronaut for NASA, the first ever woman to achieve this qualification. Fun fact here, badass character Molly Cobb from the Apple TV series For All Mankind is based on Jerry Cobb. Arriving in Pucallpa, a doctor comes to check on her, and yes, even more maggots are removed from her arm, and a smaller wound in her leg. Side note, I looked up images of maggots to insert here. Nope, not gonna do it. I advise you to not look that up. I have serious regrets. The maggot hole in her arm was very deep. A 20-inch strip of gauze soaked in something to help sterilize the wound was painfully stuffed into the former maggot haven and current deep hole in her arm, and then pulled out and replaced the next day, again and again. A large splinter, which she wasn't even aware of, was removed from her foot. Obviously, news of Julianne Kopke's survival caused a media storm, but more importantly, authorities were finally able to find the crash site and begin recovering victims. There were understandably many who were suddenly filled with hope that if this 17-year-old girl could walk out of the jungle, surely there must be others to rescue. No other survivors were found, but it is believed that a few did survive the fall, possibly between between 6 and 12, but later succumbed to their traumatic injuries not long after impact. Now, this is crazy. Shortly after her recovery started, when she not only knows that she's safe, but she understands it, believes it on a deeper level, her body and subconscious mind were no longer on high alert or in code red protection mode, something bizarre happened. As her guard dropped, she woke with a high fever that lasts for a couple of days and then disappears. And then her left knee swells up for no apparent reason. Why would it do that? Well, it turns out she had a torn cruciate ligament. She walked out of the jungle for 11 days on a torn cruciate, a virtually impossible medical feat. Her mind and body had ignored the pain signals because she had work to do. Was her desire to save herself so strong that she was able to override the pain of cuts, broken bones, infestation, starvation, and a certain disability she was suffering from so she could get home? Apparently so. A combination of military and civilian efforts took days, including many failed attempts, to get to the crash site. It was almost a comedy of errors, but it highlights the tenacity and knowledge of 17-year-old Julianne's efforts to escape the place that grown men trained in combat and survival struggled to get to. While it's undoubtedly true that luck had a hand in Julianne's survival, the tall jungle canopy, the position of the seat during impact, etc., all aligned in perfect harmony for this all but impossible outcome. But that was only half the miracle of this young lady's story, and luck had nothing to do with the journey out of the jungle that would have defeated most. The dogged determination handed down from her father, the love and knowledge of the jungle that her beloved parents shared daily, and the unflappable mental toughness that was Julianne's alone are why she survived and later went on to fulfill the dream of her parents and turn a once small remote science outpost created by two young newlyweds into a nature reserve to protect a fragile and vital ecosystem. Oh, I almost forgot. Remember this guy? Famed documentarian Werner Herzog? Well, 27 years later, Julianne received a call from Herzog. The two collaborated to retrace her steps and give her some closure to her remarkable survival in the documentary Wings of Hope. She even released her own autobiography, When I Fell from the Sky, in 2011. I recommend both of these, and I'm certain you will appreciate her book, which has a wonderful audio version. Thank you so much for watching. McNutt out.